Yeah, we're starting to get some traction, some real traction.
Google my name by government, I believe, and some other probably. And the show came up.
Oh.
Somebody wrote something about it.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis, and this show is the 13th segment in the series on the network of global corporate control. This series got its name from a study that was done by 3 mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Switzerland. They studied to see what was going on the world's capital markets with 43,000 transnational companies, and what they found out was that there was a super entity that they call the network of global corporate control. And today's program is called Front Lines in the Battle Against the Network of Global Corporate Control. And I'm one of the people on the front lines, and I'm working together with the rest of the world, and that is no exaggeration. The battle is raging on several fronts in the District of Columbia, which has a very special role in the United States, because in 1871, when the District of Columbia was created by statute, what the bankers did was they had put the United States into bankruptcy, and they created a second secret constitution. The United States had been under martial law since 1861, and the U.S. Congress has been declaring a state of emergency and continuing that martial law without bothering to tell the American public. The battle is also raging in the rest of the United States because we are now catching on to what the system is. Some people call it the matrix. And the battle against the network of global corporate control is raging in the rest of the world. And there's actually a fourth front that I want to talk about a little bit later in the program, and that is each and every one of us, in our awareness, our understanding of our world, the battle is very much raging on there, and I'm going to talk about some of the equipment that's being used in that fourth battleground. I'm the lawyer for the world's monetary gold reserves. And the reason I became the lawyer is because I worked in the World Bank legal department for 21 years, and I got to know the members on the board. The World Bank has 25 executive directors. 8 of them represent the individual countries, the largest economies. It's not one country, one vote at the World Bank. And then the remaining 17 countries, 17 executive directors, are going to be representing various countries in the constituencies. And I got to know the Board of Executive Directors very well during those 20 years because I had mentioned on an earlier program, I decided when I turned 50 that it was time for me to start blowing the whistle. I had something called a 360-degree review where the people that I was working with rated all of the people, all of the staff members, and we were given some guidance after we got our results back. And the guidance was, don't just look where you're scoring low and you need to improve. Yes, you should improve, but you also need to pay special attention to those areas where everybody agrees you're doing it very well. And I got a nearly perfect score on the question, tells senior management what they're doing wrong. Now, in the last weeks, as things have been heating up, and also on my social media net pages, we get all kinds of comments because right now there's a very large audience that's paying very close attention because they realize what the battle is and what's at stake. And what is at stake is the world's monetary gold reserves, which the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund administer. And the reason that the World Bank and the IMF were created was principally for this reason. Most of the people that work at the World Bank don't know this because the gold and the other precious metals, gems, artwork was put in trust, and the World Bank and IMF were created so that when these assets came out of the hiding, they were put into hiding for 50 years, there would be a place to administer them without creating a war. And the reason that these assets were put into hiding for 50 years was because of a legal concept called the Statute of Limitations, which meant that after 50 years, if people didn't have their claims answered, they lost their claims. So this was an attempt by the people who had put the gold and the other assets into trust for the benefit of humanity to find a way that we would be able to decide what to do with them without a world war. And the most important thing about the World Bank, aside the important job that it has, is it's called a knowledge bank. Many people come to the World Bank with very interesting information that can be used in the World Bank projects. And in 2004, a political scientist named Jacek Kugler came to the World Bank with something called a power transition model that he had developed for the United States Department of Defense. This model is extremely accurate, and it predicts how coalitions will form. And what has happened at the World Bank is it has functioned exactly the way it was intended to function. There is now a coalition for the rule of law inside the World Bank, but also outside the World Bank. Because where I'm functioning is I am functioning outside the World Bank. I cannot get in the door because this network of global corporate control has exercised something called state capture. It's captured many of the governments. It's captured the United States government. It's done this very secretly by buying up all of the media. And that's when I was talking about this fourth front that we're fighting the battle on, which is our awareness of what's going on. Many people don't know about what's going on with the world's monetary gold reserves. And this is something that cannot continue because we have to make sure that this gold comes out of hiding and is used to replace the paper currencies, which are deliberately set up to crash. And there's going to be a program that we're going to be talking about this specifically, about the something called gold backwardation. This is what happened when we went into the Dark Ages. We don't want to go into the Dark Ages. We don't want our paper currency to crash. And therefore, we are running out of time. We have got to get very serious about the global currency reset, which has already been agreed by all of the executive directors on the board of the World Bank, and it's also been agreed by something called the Board of Governors. Each and every country, their Minister of Finance or their Minister of Development is on the Board of Governors. And I have been working with the Board of Governors very, very strenuously because the network of global corporate control in the last month tried 4 different times to steal the world's monetary gold reserves. The way they did this at one point was they went to the International Court of Justice, and that court issued a memo saying that all of the documents in the trust that established the trust and the lawyer for the trust was Ferdinand Marcos. It just invalidated those documents. And so what the Board of Governors did, I cleared with them our response. We said that the International Court of Justice had absolutely no authority over this matter, first of all because of the statute of limitations, and also because the legal documents establishing the trust specifically said that the courts had no jurisdiction over this matter. So we voided the attempt of the network of global corporate control to steal the assets. And what that has done is it's given prominence to this matter, and a lot of the people who were skeptical, when they see the documents, there were 2 other attempts, I won't go into that, but people now understand that this is really the case. Back in February, we issued something called a notarial protest. And when I say we, the way this happens is I create documents and I circulate them to the public and also to all of the embassies. Sometimes I send documents by certified mail when these are documents where I have to prove that they were received. And what I did last week was I went to 25 of the embassies in Washington, because during the spring meeting and the annual meeting of the Board of Governors, there's a committee that was established. It's called the Development Committee. It was established by the Group of 77 because they wanted to have a way of holding the Board of Executive Directors at the World Bank accountable. And so I went to the Development Committee and I gave them documents saying specifically that they were ordering Allied Barton, which is a subsidiary of the Network of Global Corporate Control, they were ordering Allied Barton to reactivate my security badge so that I could go inside the World Bank and so that we could start working on the global currency reset, which has already been agreed among the countries. What is this reset? We're going to be replacing all of the paper currencies with currencies that have gold in them. It's going to be handled just like paper currency because the gold is going to be pressed very thin. There's a technology for this, but the value of the bill, the face amount of the bill, is going to have gold in there. And we're not talking about a one currency at all because each of the nations is going to be issuing its currency. And of course, the nations in the European Union are going to have to decide whether they want to stay in the Union and have that currency issued as euros. They have to make up their minds. So there is a lot of decision making that has to go on. We have to count the gold because there have been claims of thefts, and I've been submitting claims against the insurers that have insured all of the world's monetary gold reserves. That's Lincoln, and that's also Lloyd's. So we have a lot of work, and we have to get started on this because you can imagine it's a monumental job. But the other thing that we're doing is we are taking all of these banks, which is really just one conglomerate, one bank, and we are putting them into receivership. We're winding them down, and all of the governments are going to have to be deciding how to carve up this octopus. And there are many, many companies that this network controls. We're going to have to come to agreement about which country gets which company. These are not simple matters. So we have to get started. And where we stand on that is that we're being thwarted by the network. They're not cooperating. And this is not a surprise. But so what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell you specifically who is standing in the way, and we have to hold these officials accountable. First, let's talk about who's been helping. In the United States, there is a group called the County Executives, and they have accepted the monetary gold that belongs to the United States. One of the officers is the president pro tem in the county which I live in, which is Montgomery County. That's Isaiah Leggett. And so one of the other officials that's been helping in Montgomery County again is the chief of police, Tom Manger. And I've spent the day discussing with Chief Manger's officials exactly how we're going to get the District of Columbia to stop being so corrupt. there was a meeting of this, the group that the Chief Manger is the president of. It's called the Chiefs of Major Cities. And they had a meeting in a place called the Museum. This place, museum, likes to hold itself out as a museum. Nobody knows that it's owned by the network of global corporate control. When you go to that museum, I actually bought an admission ticket because I wasn't sure how I was going to get into those meetings. But I did succeed to get in. And I sat there, and it was really quite interesting to hear what the police chiefs think about how outraged people are at the violence, at the crime, and many of these officials recognize their special responsibility. But the problem is that this organization, it's set up under something called Metro 1313. Again, that's the network of global corporate control that wants to make sure that citizens are not aware of what's really going on. It looks like it's a good organization, but I can tell you when they found out who I was, they tried to evict me. But what I did was I saw Chief Manger went out to get a Coke, so I went and I told him who I was. And of course, I'd been sending a lot of correspondence, not only to Chief Manger, but all of the members of the board of this Major Cities Chiefs Association. So he knew exactly what we're up against, that if the United States is going to continue, we have got to replace the paper currency before it crashes. And so it was really quite interesting. So I had a conversation with Chief Manger, and people were interrupting us. They were trying to tell him that he had no right to talk to me. And finally, he told them that they had to back off, and we went out and we discussed in a private conversation out on the patio that I expected his help in getting me back into the World Bank, that if the county executives of America had accepted the gold monetary reserves on behalf of the American citizens, it was his duty to make sure that, that the law was obeyed, and this network of global corporate control is just completely out of line, especially when you recognize the fact that they are totally bankrupt. There are bonds that were issued in order to get the gold from some of the elites back in the 30s. These are called Treaty of Versailles bonds, and there was over $200 trillion worth of those bonds, which carried interest that has been compounding. It's now over $2 quadrillion worth. And that means that when the bankers say that we owe them money, they owe us much more money than we owe them. And the place to resolve those claims is inside the global debt facility. So in reality, all of the salaries of the police is really being financed by the global debt facility. We have foreclosed on the Fed. The Fed, I've filed financing statements. I used the notarial protest, which was set up actually by Benjamin Franklin, because he knew in the future at some point we were going to have a way to get our world back from the bankers. In other shows, we've been discussing how when people think they have legal title to their property, they don't. They have warranty deeds that were issued by the states, and the actual title to the property that they have paid off fully is held by the bankers. There are a lot of shenanigans that many, many people know about. And of course, there are many people who don't know about it. And we're going to be talking at the end of the broadcast a little bit about why it's so difficult to get people to understand about the real situation. I wanted to talk a little bit about the museum, which is owned by the network of global corporate control. I have gone into the museum a number of times because the network likes to have all kinds of different conferences there. At one point, there was a world justice report where the network of global corporate control was giving the United States high marks on its legal system. And of course, when you realize the amount of corruption that's going on, we don't deserve the rating that we got. And so I had asked a question when that report was presented. I don't know, Carmen, if you can run that clip for us. Just before I made my question, there was a similar question by a lawyer who was working in the Russian consulate. I don't know if you have a piece of that clip to show as well, Carmen.
Government, I believe, and some other probably private donors. But is it really worth 8 million, this biased, politicized piece of propaganda? It's not fact-based. It's propaganda-based and foreign interests-based. And finally, US and Western firms control almost 2/3 of current market of legal services in Russia. They are dominating this market. But probably they are also a part of this corrupt, as you say, environment. Is there any basis, it's a very specific question, for the Department of Justice to initiate some investigations of violations of Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by legal firms from US in Russia? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. You've given us a lot to talk about here. Juan, Alex, would you like to begin?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you first for joining. We greatly encourage dialogue based on facts with governments. We normally don't consult with governments before the results. We'll never really consult with governments before the results are out. But once they are out, we really encourage and are happy to engage in discussions based on the specific data that underlies each one of these reports. And in this particular case, I would like to simply point out that the World Justice Project is an independent 501c3 organization. It has not received significant funding from one specific source. It is a wide diversity of companies, foundations, individuals all over the world. Our only goal is to advance the rule of law in every country in the world, and all countries, including highly developed nations, have very significant rule of law issues that were highlighted in the presentation.
So what you see is that there is a lot of deception. We're being told that there is rule of law. The network of global corporate control is just absolutely pulling the wool over many people's eyes. And let's talk a little bit about sheep for a minute. I saw a movie, Far from the Madding Crowd, where there's a scene where a new untrained sheepdog herds a whole flock of sheep over the cliff. And I tweeted about that because there are many people who are just, they're like zombies. They believe everything that the network of global corporate control is telling them. They believe the mainstream media. It's nothing but a pack of lies designed to bring down the United States when the paper currency crashes, which is going to happen unless we get ourselves involved in the global currency reset. Now, I was talking about this power transition model and about the coalitions that exist, and I was telling you that I had gotten through to the 25 members on the Development Committee, which ordered Allied Barton to let me into the World Bank so that the people that want their gold currency reserves, they'll be entitled to them, and we'll be able to have the global currency reset. And what is going to happen when that happens? And the likelihood that it happens is 90 to 95%. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be working together in uncharted terrain, because this network of global corporate control has been secretly behind the curtains since the previous ice age. And they have been supporting a lot of puppets. All of the royalty and the elites have been kept in place deliberately by this network. And we're not going to be punishing this elite, because we need the elite to work on a smooth, peaceful transition. And if we tell the elite that we're going to be locking them up, we're going to be punishing them, they will not collaborate, and we will all suffer. The only way we will have a currency reset will be similar to what happened in the French Revolution. And we don't need to go there. We can use the Bretton Woods institutions, which were deliberately created so that we could have a smooth, peaceful transition. And the thing I would also like to emphasize, because a lot of people have been raising questions about whether it's possible to trust the Bretton Woods institutions, because they've been captured by the network of global corporate control, and they have not been doing their job the way they were intended to function. Now, the boards are supposed to be in charge, but in reality, what you have is you've got the puppets from the network. So you've got Jim Kim, and you've got Lagarde, that are just following instructions by the network of global corporate control, rather than the board actually governing, the board of executive directors and the board of governors. And so what has to happen is just simply that you allow these boards to function. And what needs to happen with the global currency reset is that they just do a very simple, straightforward thing, which is to replace the currencies, not get in charge of what's going on inside the politics of the individual countries. And that's the way the articles read, and that's the way they were designed. And you have to find out whether the whistleblowers, both inside the World Bank and outside the World Bank, are being punished, because if they are, you don't know what's going on. And if they're not, there's a very good chance that you'll find out what's actually going on. I wanted to spend the last 4 minutes talking about a very serious challenge that we have, and that is how we think, because our minds are being hypnotized. Some of us are not susceptible to hypnotism, but some of us are. And so what you have is you have technology using supercomputers which are able to take EEGs and broadcast them using the abilities that we have. Our minds are designed to be receptive to extremely low frequency radio waves. And the military has been using these radio waves to hypnotize many people. And that's why it's very difficult for us to get through to a lot of people, because they've been hypnotized. And this happens, I get correspondence from people talking about their families where one person understands what's going on. They've been reading on the internet and they've been working through the issues, and the rest of the family refuses to hear them out. And I know this personally, how this works. What you need to do in that case is to simply leave the people that are being hijacked by this technology. You need to leave them in peace and work with the people who are receptive. And I believe there are enough of us that are understanding what's going on that we can carry the day. But specifically, what has to happen is that we need to get the District of Columbia to get itself out of the grid that it's in, because they think that they're supposed to be answering to the network of global corporate control. And they should be answering to the people in the United States and the people in the District of Columbia. So we're now broadcasting all over the world, and also specifically in the District of Columbia, So I want to say a clear message to Jeff Clay, who was the officer who asked me not to talk about what's going on. I want him to know that he's accountable. Today we have discussed whether the network of global corporate control knows that it's lost. The frontline battle against this corruption in the District of Columbia is very much going on, and therefore I'm going to be very happy to keep you posted. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Udis. Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Udis. Today's show is the 16th segment in the series on the network of global corporate control. We're coming to you live on August 18th from the studios of DCTV. Today's program is about Mark Twain's statement, "The report of my death is greatly exaggerated." Mark Twain is one of my favorite American heroes. And the reason why I'm taking that quote from Mark Twain is because of the recent headlines, which are talking about how the United States is in a terrible situation, that there's extreme debt that's going to cause a global meltdown, and the U.S. is one of the two countries that's in the biggest debt. Japan is the other. The United States is gearing up for an economic apocalypse, according to some of the pundits in the media. And there's another headline about Russia and China that are creating an entirely different gold market. All of these stories are absolutely correct, but they're forgetting the most important story of all, and that's the story that we're telling you about. That story is about the Global Debt Facility, which is a trust that's containing a lot of wealth, including all of the world's monetary gold reserves. That's administered by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. And as a lawyer who was working in the World Bank for 20 years and who was tutored by Aaron Brochus, who was the longest serving general counsel, he told me what to expect when I went into the World Bank, because he was there when it started to go really corrupt. A lot of people are concerned about the world's wealth being under the control of the World Bank and IMF because they see the terrible things that the Bretton Woods institutions are doing. It's called the Bretton Woods institutions because that is the site of the conference in 1944. It's a ski resort in New Hampshire. And the Bretton Woods institutions have been captured by the network of global corporate control. That is one big company that is controlling the world's capital markets, and it contains the 60 central banks, and it prints money for free and charges all of the countries interest on their debt. And it has been responsible for a lot of the problems that we're talking about. And because this network controls the media, many people don't look behind the headlines in the mainstream media, and at least 80% of the alternative media. I'm very grateful to the people here at DCTV for giving this program the opportunity to tell people what's really going on. We have been putting the segments on YouTube, and if you're interested to find out how people react to the documents that we have posted, proving all of the statements that we've made, some of the very concerning things that we've reported are, for example, the fact that there was an attempt to nuke Charleston on the 7th of October 2013. We've shown how there's been seismograph records, there's been eyewitness reports of how the nuclear convoy with an active live bomb landed in Charleston Air Force Base, and we also talked about how the naval cables were intercepted by the Russians. And we have a very obviously serious situation, but one of the things that we have that has been really helping us is it's called a power transition model, which uses game theory to show how coalitions form. That came to the World Bank in 2004, and it has been on track. It's 90 to 95% accurate. We have experience whenever there's an argument between the experts and the model wins, because what it shows is how the various parties interact to form the coalitions. And I was brought into the World Bank by Ibrahim Shihada, who was the general counsel of the OPEC, that's the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And I was at the World Bank for 20 years, and the board inside the World Bank, that's 25 executive directors, 8 of them represent the largest economies, and the other executive directors are in groups of countries. They got to know me, and they understood that I was there simply to give the countries voice. And that is why they have allowed me to represent the Global Debt Facility, which, as I said, represents the world's monetary gold reserves. And one of the people who criticized some of the things that we've been doing said that I really had to focus in the beginning on what's newsworthy. So let me tell you what I think is probably the most newsworthy thing, and that is that the Board of Governors, that's 188 ministers of finance, and they act through something called the Development Committee, which is 25 ministers of finance. I'm in touch with these ministers. I hand deliver the letters to the embassies and ask for the embassies to convey them to the ministers of finance. And what we have said to the company that is the security agency, they're called Allied Barton, and they have been refusing to allow me to go into the World Bank. What we said to Allied Barton was that if Allied Barton did not allow me into the World Bank, they should simply quit the premises. They were fired. They actually were fired a couple of years ago, and there was another security firm that was prepared to take their place, but we were not able to get the disbursements to the replacement firm, and that firm has now decided that it didn't want to be involved with a confrontation with a network of global corporate control. But the Board of Governors understands that we are now in a situation where we have got to act. That's because the paper currencies are going to fail. Paper currencies always fail. And because we have the world's monetary gold, what we are going to do is we are going to there's a new technology where you press the gold very thin and you put it in what's like a plastic envelope, but it handles just like currency. You have the exact value of the bill inside with gold inside that envelope. And all of the countries are going to be minting that currency. It's going to be their own currency. For the European countries, they're going to have to decide whether they want to go back to their individual currencies or whether they want to stay in the European Union. All of these decisions are going to be made by the countries themselves. We are not talking about a one world order. What we are talking about, though, is we are talking about the United States ending its state capture. It is now the United States is now in a situation called interregnum. That's because the United States Congress has been lying to the American people. They have refused to tell the American people that they have been declaring a state of emergency behind closed doors, and we are in a military dictatorship where people don't really know it, but they do if they look at all of the documentary proof that we have. And we have been covering all of the legal implications. The legal profession has been lying to people systematically. So have the accountants, so have the journalists, and so have most of the politicians. Some of the politicians are doing their jobs. For example, we have several members of parliament in the United Kingdom that have asked George Osborne why he has not accepted the offer of gold from the global debt facility. All of the ministers of finance have received this offer, and whenever anybody gets in touch with me, and it's very easy to find me, you either email me, and Carmen, maybe you could show the email address. Thank you. And I answer my emails. Sometimes it's just a one-liner because you can imagine I'm quite busy. And the way things work, a lot of people want to know who's working, who's in this, we call it the Coalition for the Rule of Law. It's not tightly knit because I have to be reporting to the Board of Governors, and I cannot delegate. I have got to be there and accountable, and therefore, for example, this week, some people were asking me whether I would allow them to set up a website to describe what the global debt facility was, and I had to turn them down, but I also got an email from somebody in Africa who's been lecturing, going around his country and lecturing people, and that's what people have to do. And they also, in the United States, have to get in touch with their county executives because the county executives have accepted the offer of monetary gold. And we are now ready to start printing it. And in the interim, there are bills that were printed by Ronald Reagan. He didn't issue them because he was shot by Hinckley to prevent him from doing that. But we have those bills, and those can be issued in the interim until we finish getting it's called aurum, the gold that's going to be minted from the gold in the global debt facility. And there's also local currencies. We've talked a little bit about that, and we're going to be devoting in the future a program on exactly what the local communities can be doing. But the most important thing, I think, is just to understand that there is a coalition for the rule of law, and we are going to be okay. And you do not have to get so frightened by all of these terrible, we call them fear porn stories that are appearing in the controlled media. Because, as I said, the chances that we come out of this transition, it's a transition, and the chances that we come out of this transition smoothly are 90 to 95%. And you will know, a lot of people ask me, what is the timing for this? As I told you, this really, in a lot of respects, depends on how active the people who are listening to me are in holding their politicians accountable, because this is a peaceful transition. We've also been debating about whether some of the people that have been colluding with the network of global corporate control ought to be punished. And it's very simple. If this is a peaceful transition, if we're threatening to put these people in jail, we're not going to have a transition. And it's much more important that we all survive then that some people are punished. I think if you, we've had a debate about this. If you think about it, you'll understand that maybe it doesn't feel so good to know that you're not going to be punishing people who have been keeping people in slavery. Maybe it doesn't feel so good, but we really don't have any choice if we have got to transition all of us together. Now, we're going to have a discussion about the world's gold next week. That's a program that's been pre-taped. But when you're trying to figure out how all of this is going to work, you have to understand that Germany now realizes that their gold is also in the global debt facility. It is not in their Bundesbank. And same thing for the Netherlands, same thing for every single country. Your gold is not in your central bank, and those central banks are actually insolvent. That's because there is something called the Treaty of Versailles bonds, and they've been accruing interest since the 1930s. They're now valued above $2 quadrillion, and that's going to offset country debt. So anybody who's worried about whether they're going to be able to pay back their country debt, including Greece, you're not going to have to. It's going to be offset against what the central banks owe us. And one of the things that happened this week is that the Federal Reserve in New York announced that it's moving to Chicago, and people wanted to know why. And I was able to explain the reason why. That is because I have filed what's called financing statements, because the Federal Reserve owes money to the global debt facility. That's these Treaty of Versailles bonds, and you're allowed to file financing statements, which is what I did in 10 of the states. And one of the states, Illinois, Jesse White, the Secretary of State, wrote a letter saying that he was going to invalidate that financing statement. And under the statute, he had no right, because the World Bank is a regulated bank. That's because the National Advisory Council on International Monetary and Financial Policies oversees the World Bank. Who's on the NAC? It's chaired by the Secretary of the Treasury. It's got the chairman of the Federal Reserve on it. It's got the State Department Secretary of State on it. It's got the economic agencies, the Commerce Department, and all of these people they understand, because I've been in touch with them many, many times. They understand that they're not doing their job, because the World Bank has a huge corruption problem. The financial statements are not accurate, and that is why I was supposed to be reinstated. And when this didn't happen, the United States contribution to the capital increase was withheld. And that's when Secretary Geithner lied to Congress and said that they had met the conditions. And I went right to Congress and showed that that the Secretary of the Treasury had been lying, and that's when he had to resign. So we in the Board of Governors of the World Bank know full well that the financing statement in Chicago against the Federal Reserve is valid, and that's what we told the Federal Reserve. There's a picture of a big fish and a little fish, Carmen. I don't know if you can show that, but that shows that the network of global corporate control is going to be wound down. Some people were asking, what does in receivership mean? That means that the right to decide what happens is determined by the Board of Governors, not by the Board of the Federal Reserve. When is this actually going to happen? It's probably going to happen pretty soon, but you'll have to stay tuned to find out exactly how we go with the transition. One of the other groups that's trying to steal the world's gold, that's the royalty, and there's a fellow ASM, and Anthony Santiago Martin, he claimed that he had the authority But he absolutely does not. If you read the documents in the global debt facility, it says very clearly that none of the money in the global debt facility can be dispersed unless the Board of Governors have authenticated the authority of that person. Now, Ferdinand Marcos was the first lawyer, and he set it up so that there were many potential people who were assigned the right to sign for the global debt facility. The way the Board of Governors is going to handle this, they're not just going to give carte blanche to one individual, because although Ferdinand Marcos was able to stand up to the risk of corruption, we don't believe that one individual can, and that's why anybody who says that they are something called M1, that's the person who's authorized to sign for the global debt facility, there isn't going to be another M1. The Board of Governors, for each and every transaction out of the global debt facility, that authorized signatory is going to have to be authenticated for each and every conveyance. That way we will know that that the money is not going to be stolen, and that's the way it is. It's going to be very interesting, actually, to see how we organize ourselves. We're not going to have all of these what they call black funds. There's going to be a lot of background work that's going to have to be done, because most of the gold is buried in the Philippines, and there have been reports that some helicopters have started flying away with this gold. And I've asked the military to start looking into these claims. And don't laugh, because we recognize, of course, that the U.S. military has been dominated by a group called the Knights of Malta. That's why they did not accept the offer of gold. But the way it works in the U.S. military is there are also committees like the Joint Japan-U.S. Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement. And so there are people outside that chain of corrupt command who are working in Japan. And so we've been working with them. And that's why I'm relatively optimistic that we are going to have a smooth transition to the rule of law. As the Global Debt Facility's lawyer, I filed a notarial protest with the Director General of the Universal Postal Union's International Bureau, Bishar Abdurrahman Hussain. And this said very clearly that the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury Department did not possess the U.S. monetary gold reserves. And I included the Treaty of Versailles gold certificates that are worth over $2 quadrillion, owed to the global debt facility by the network of global corporate control. And when the Secretary of State of Illinois, as I mentioned, invalidated that financing statement, the Board of Governors went back to him. There's a letter that I've put out on the internet saying you have no authority to invalidate that UCC form. And I really think that we're going to it's not going to be so difficult, because one of the documents that I also tweeted was a response of the Secretary of State of Michigan. I've copied all of the Secretaries of State. They know full well that the Federal Reserve is not, it doesn't have the U.S. monetary gold reserves. It's insolvent, and it is going to be wound down. I just received this afternoon a phone call from somebody who was telling me that they had a good arrangement for how to do this. They were planning on cutting deals. And I said to them right off the bat, without seeing anything, I said, there are no deals that are going to be cut. It is the Board of Governors of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund that are in charge. And we're not going to be cutting side deals in back rooms. All of this is going to be out there in front of the people for them to see. And that's, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. There are a lot of issues that are going to have to be resolved. I've got a list of them. One of these things is the draft monetary agreement, And people want to know, how are they going to get the gold? It's going to be in your currency, and we're going to be able to see how much currency goes out to the public. That's how you're going to know that you're getting your gold. It's not going to be very easy, I think, to steal the gold. We're going to make sure that it's not so easy to steal the gold. But of course, we have got to get an accurate baseline, and that's going to take some doing, because we're not just talking about the monetary gold reserves. We're talking about artworks. We're talking about gemstones. We actually have been slaving, whereas we're rich. In reality, we're rich, and we have to find out how rich we are. So that's one of the things that we have to be looking at. One of the things we have to do is we have to calculate the historic price of gold, because if the gold is in the currency, and these envelopes can be opened, if you don't have the price right, it stands to reason that people are going to take the gold out if the gold has been undervalued. So the way we're going to be doing that, I've asked UNCTAD to look at the historic price of gold over centuries in the major currencies, because gold has served as currency from time immemorial. So we're going to see what we can do to accurately calculate the price of gold. One of the questions, of course, is the excess currencies. There's been a lot of extra currencies printed, including a lot of extra US dollars, and we're going to have to figure out how these excess speculation, because those are not going to be converted into aurum. That's the name of the bills that are going to be used for the gold. But you're going to find out, all of you, you're going to find out what the Board of Governors decides, and you yourself can hold your own Minister of Finance accountable for letting you know. So that's how it's going to be going forward. And the most important thing is really going to be in the local communities, how you hold your own local boards. And in the United States, we're talking about the county executives. I have not been successful in dealing with the governors. You can see, if you go back in your history books, that it was the governors who in 1934, with absolutely no authority, were the ones that pledged the citizens to paying back the central bankers' debt. They had no authority to do this, but they did. I started, you'll see in all of the documents that I have really worked very hard at each and every level in holding the representatives of the people to account. And I've gone to the very central organizations. For example, in the accounting profession, I've gone to the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions. I've gone to the agencies that represent the accounting firms, the IFAC, and these groups have been complicit with the network of global corporate control. So we are going to have to really work to find ways of getting the job done without entrusting it to the very professions that have been betraying the people. So there aren't going to be any shortcuts, but the one thing that we have to rush with is to make sure that the paper currencies are replaced, because they're not stable, and we don't want to go into another dark ages. One of the questions I've been asked is, what about some of the candidates for the 2016 elections? There's been a lot of discussion about them, and I'm sorry to say that there's only one candidate, that's Rick Santorum, who has even come close to getting at some of these issues. And that was when Rick Santorum was asked about this attempt to nuke Charleston, South Carolina. Other than that, Trump No, I'm sorry. I have been in touch with his campaign. I've been in touch with his son. I've been in touch with his lawyer. And he is absolutely, he's more of the same, which is to say that this is not, this is a distraction. We have got to be talking about the fundamental corruption that we have to address, rather than Tweedledum and Tweedledee that are not really giving us any choice at all. And these are very serious issues. One of the things I also wanted to mention, just briefly, is what's been going on in the Ukraine. I was at Ocean City, Maryland last week with my family, and we saw a young Ukrainian student from Odessa who said that her parents had asked her to try to find a way to stay in this country because of the terrible things that are going on in the Ukraine. I had a Ukrainian roommate for 4 years, Nadia Karpe, in New York, and they're a wonderful people. They don't deserve what's been happening in that country. But we've discussed how there's every reason to be optimistic as we work together in the cooperative called the Bretton Woods Institutions to end corruption in the international financial system. Roughly 3/4 of the American public consistently prefers that the United States act together jointly with other nations in foreign affairs. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Thank you very much. And good night to all of you, especially to my friend, I call him Bjorn in Sweden. I believe he stayed up. It's now past midnight for him. Thank you, and till next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.